mean, really anything. But what I would like to do is for us to have a really good discussion, and I would like to be able to facilitate that discussion, because I know that you all have been doing this for various amounts of time. And so some of you have been doing this for a really long time, and some of you have been doing this for a shorter amount of time. And you all bring skills, and you all bring knowledge. And so in our discussion today, please feel free to share your skills and your knowledge, because we're all learning, continual learners, right? Okay. So today, the goals, after completing this, we're going to be able to, of course, define self-awareness, understand why it's important in the helping process. We're going to review important case manager skills, such as creating, maintaining boundaries, and confidentiality. Okay, first of all, I'd like to tell you a little bit about an experience that I had, and I'm hoping that this experience will really frame our discussion for today. When I must have been out of college maybe 2 years, I guess, and I worked in a position where I was responsible for gathering grants and distributing grants to persons who were on dialysis. And so I met Melvin, it's a pseudonym, okay, and he was 44-year-old Caucasian male. He was homeless. He'd been on dialysis for 4 years, and he did not have any family in the area. So he came into the agency that I worked for, and we started talking, and he mentioned that he needed funding. He had been staying at a motel where you can, stay by the week or by the month. So he'd been staying there, and he was talking about that. And I said, you know what? I have a program just for you. And I was so excited because we had just received funding to provide to persons who were on dialysis or on the kidney transplant list. So I was so excited, and I said, I have some funding. I said, I need to talk to your case manager, and we can figure out, how to get this money to you, because we could give about $500 or $1,000. And so I spoke with his case manager, and we got really, really excited because first of all, we had funding, which was great, and then second of all, he fit our criteria for that funding, so it was a good match. Well, to make a long story short, we arranged for him to move into an apartment, and the only thing that he needed to do, let me back up, he was receiving disability, so his disability check, along with some other funds that he received, would cover his rent, and he would have lots of money, well, not lots, but he would have additional money for additional expenses. So, talked to a social worker, we set it up, all he had to do was show up and sign the lease. We already sent the check for the first and the last month's rent. And all he had to do was show up. Did he show up? No. No. And when I found out that he didn't show up, I was so hurt because I felt like I had done something so wonderful. And his other social worker was angry because she said, I don't understand. We did this and he's not showing up. Why didn't he do this? Well, guess what? We tracked him down, and we found out that he didn't want to live there. He didn't want to live there. And he said, I didn't come in and ask you all to get a lease for this place. I asked you all to help me to pay my rent at this temporary motel that I was staying in. Now, I mentioned that for a very specific reason. Can anybody take a guess why I mentioned that?
Mm-hmm. Because you can't assume what the client wants.
I couldn't assume, absolutely, I couldn't assume what that client wanted. I was thinking about my own personal values and what I would want. If I happen to be a dialysis patient, I would want a stable place to stay. I was looking at it through my own lens of what I would do. I wasn't looking at it and listening to what he actually said that he needed. I pretty much didn't think about his self-determination and that he had the right to decide, hey, I don't want to live in this home or this apartment. I want to continue to stay here. And not only that, in terms of boundaries, I really, when I started working with him, we then kind of pushed him aside, and the social worker and I basically took responsibility for him, and we crossed over some boundaries. we contacted the landlord on his behalf. We went and we did all of these things. And in hindsight, I think about this situation and I realize, wow, what a teachable moment, what a learning experience for me, because it really did show me that you really have to, first of all, listen to what your client says and not see it within the framework of your own value system, but also you have to understand those boundaries that exist. And there's both of his social worker and myself, we really stepped over those boundaries and we took it as our mission. And so in hindsight, really learned a lot that really helped me to think about how we deliver services to people. So I want to start by just saying a few words about self-awareness, because I think you can't really talk about boundaries and you can't really talk about confidentiality without really saying something about self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Because self-awareness, what is it? What is it? Self-awareness.
Knowing who I am, which are my assets, which are my shortcomings.
Absolutely, absolutely. Knowing your strengths, your limitations, knowing your own personal value system. And I work with quite a few students in field, okay, and the students that I've worked with have been very, very diverse. And I always tell them, and not just for students, but for all of us, we have to be self-aware. We have to know where we sit on certain issues because, for example, if you know that it makes you uncomfortable or it's hard for you to work with a certain type of person, and you are going to be working with that person, you have to be self-aware enough to understand that about yourself so that you can figure out strategies so that you don't let that person know that you're uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the first time I actually worked with a person who was a sex offender, that was challenging for me because, you know, you always hear all of these statements about sex offenders, and so I really had to say, okay, well, what are my personal feelings, but then step back from that and say, as a professional, what is my goal? My goal is to deliver the best service to this person, the best service possible.
Mm-hmm.
This person is coming here because this person needs something, and so I need to be able to be as professional and as helpful and as supportive as possible. And so it really helped me to understand, okay, this may make me feel a little bit uncomfortable. How am I going to, when I'm meeting with that person, how am I going to make sure that that person doesn't know that I might feel a little bit uncomfortable, okay? And how am I going to allow myself to see this person as a person and to really move forward with that relationship and that encounter. And so it is so important, that whole self-awareness piece. So awareness of our needs. And the question is, how do we develop self-awareness? Well, it's a process. Do we ever finish developing self-awareness? Mm-hmm. It's a constant process. See, you all know this stuff. Why am I even here? You all can come and teach my classes. But yeah, it's an ongoing process. And I'm always saying to not only myself but to students that I work with, you know, the day that you say, oh, I know it all, is the day that you realize that you're not helping, because growth is a lifelong journey. And so self-awareness is a process, and it really helps us to get to figure out who we are as people. Okay, so here's a little cartoon. I've tried to find something funny, and unfortunately it's not that funny. I want greater self-awareness, but can I continue to be unaware of my bad qualities? And the funny part is, it's a chicken. Okay, so moving from self-awareness to boundaries. Gasp, an alien. Not just any alien. I am a personal space invader. Golly, that sure is uncomfortable. And I saw this one, you know. I thought, oh, Space Invader. I remember that video game from the 80s and 90s, Space Invaders. So sorry I couldn't find any more comics that were more humorous, but at least I was able to find some that represents what we want to say. So boundaries. What are boundaries? What are boundaries? If I said, so-and-so has, they have great professional boundaries. If we're talking about boundaries, what does that mean?
Something in place that you would not cross.
Okay.
Limits.
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 Absolutely. And a lot of times when we talk about boundaries, sometimes we forget that there are different types of boundaries.
Mhm.
You can talk about boundaries, like in this instance, this person is having their physical boundary invaded. But, we can talk about asking really intrusive questions when we don't need to know the answers,
Mhm.
We can also talk about trying to push views on other people when those may be our views, but not necessarily the other person's views. So we can really talk about, different types of boundaries being violated. And so self-awareness and boundaries are linked because if you are on that path to good self-awareness development and you know who you are, you know what makes you feel great, you know what makes you feel uncomfortable, you know what motivates you, then it's easy for you to identify when you're in situations when you might be pushing the boundaries.
Mhm.
Okay, it's easier for you to identify those situations, and so they're linked. So the whole idea of boundaries. Okay, so boundaries assume generally unspoken rules that people internalize about the physical and emotional limits of their relationships with other people. You always have to have a textbook definition, I guess. Due to the nature of generalist practice, and I come from a social work perspective, so I threw in social work in general. Boundary dilemmas, do they occur?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
Oh, sure.
Every day,
Mm-hmm.
every day. And what usually happens is we experience these dilemmas and we have to make some choices as to how we're going to react to them. And I can honestly say, sometimes I've had these dilemmas and I look back on these things and I've been like, yes, I feel good about that. But there are a few times when I've looked back and I've said, I should have really done X, Y, and Z. Like the time when I was working with someone, working with a client, and they asked me something really personal, and it was just really threw me off guard, and I was like, okay, do I answer this? And for that split moment, the power was unequal in the room because they held a lot of power over me, and I'm like, so hopefully you all will be able to say, oh, there are more times when I'm like, yes, I did a good job with that. That's our goal, right? Because we're not perfect, but what we want to be able to do is when we have these dilemmas and we look back on them, we want to be able to say, okay, what did I learn from it? And okay, how could I handle this differently so that next time if it happens, we have a different outcome. Now, we have a little scenario for you. Nicolette and Tina. Two fabulous people. And Emily has graciously agreed to be Nicolette, and I'm going to be Tina. So Tina Brown is a case manager. She's 32 years old. She has a history of domestic violence. She entered the helping profession because she wants to help people. So with her history of domestic violence, she experienced people who helped her. So she wants to give back. She wants to be part of the solution. Nicolette Davis is 24 and she's newly released from the Richmond City Jail. She was incarcerated for domestic violence. She assaulted her partner. Okay. Hi Nicolette, welcome to AR. I am your case manager, Tina Brown. And today I'm going to ask you a series of questions so that we can work together to figure out what you need to be successful. I know that you filled out a form while you were waiting for me, so okay, let's go over your form.
Okay.
So you're 24?